Anyone else?
There's one back there.
Hey, I was just wondering if, like, how successful people were at actually finding information about you. I mean, like you mentioned that they found like your IP address in Las Vegas, but I was just wondering if there was other activities that you were doing that they did discover about.
They were more successful at digging up information that already existed than they were actually, finding out day-to-day information about me. Because until someone knew my fake name, that was incredibly difficult. Because I could be doing anything. I could be on any website. It could be anywhere. But they were excellent at digging up every single bit of information from every crevice that could be gleaned online or through databases that investigators can access, through public documents, whether real estate records or driver's license. They found out that I got a motorcycle license recently, before I left and things like that. But it wasn't until really Jeff Riefman was the first person to kind of make a connection to my new identity. So to actually dig up a piece of information about where I was right then. And that was obviously the key to my undoing. I was careful that I didn't tell anyone, including my girlfriend who I live with, where I was going or what I was doing. I didn't even leave a hint. But you could sort of see how through interviews, and the editors at Wired were interviewing my friends and posting interviews online, that they could start to paint a picture. And one friend of mine even said, I bet he's in New Orleans, just because we grew up together in Atlanta, we had been to New Orleans as kids, and he thought, well, that seems like a natural place for him to go. So, my point is that the information from my past eventually would coalesce into something that would probably help him find me. A month wasn't long enough for that to really help, so it really took someone making the connection through, finding my IP address and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Hi, Evan.
Hi.
Hindsight being 2020, is there anything you would have done differently those last couple days that you look back and say, God, if I only would have done this, like looked across that park before you went to the pizza place or something like that? Anything jump out at you like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one, there was one single moment actually, which is when the first time I accessed that page on Facebook that Jeff Riefman created. I can distinctly remember making the decision to not go through my Vegas office, not use the Tor software to hide my IP address, thinking, look, I'm just accessing Facebook. So unless somebody who works at Facebook is like going to steal my IP and then give it out to the public, which frankly I probably should have been worried about as well, but I thought, well, that's relatively unlikely. I thought, I can't be bothered with all this anymore. I'm just going to go check this page and see what people are saying. So that moment right there, I would certainly change. And then overall, I think that I would probably try to change my location more quickly in the last week because I had spent so much time in New Orleans. It was sort of like, they were closing in around me. But again, it was this issue of if you're really going to do this, if you really had to disappear, eventually you want to land somewhere and live your life. And I was going to cafes, I was going to bars, I was having fun in New Orleans as much as I could. I had an apartment, and I didn't want to be on the run constantly because it's exhausting. So, but of course, if I really didn't want to get caught and I could look back now, I would have been out of there already. To a city with more than one gluten-free pizza place, probably.
I was wondering how you changed your life afterwards. For example, the prevalence of RFID chips that is coming out. People are volunteering to be implanted to be VIP members in clubs and have it put on their credit card and their room charge, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. As much as you would think that because I did this, that I have strong feelings about privacy and that sort of thing, I don't, because I mean, what you have to do is you have to sit down and make the calculation. I think it's dumb to do things without actually reflecting on what they might mean for your privacy. But if I decide, I don't know if the club would be a good example for me, but if I decide that convenience is worth it for me, that if some club knows my information or even my date of birth, then maybe I don't care, and maybe it's worth it to me. And if I want to make that decision, fine. And if you do, then you got to hope that a lot of people make that decision, because there's a sort of strength in numbers in the fact that everyone's doing this, and there's so much information that yours is sort of less important in the grand scheme of things. And I don't like to be marketed to. I don't like people knowing things about me, but at the same time, I recognize that a lot of things I do when I go order a book online or whatever, I do it because I'm making a choice for convenience. So I suppose I do worry about it, but I don't. Like many people, I don't act on it. But I try to at least each time say, well, is this worth it to me?
And there are also things that you can't do anything about, like, I had to get a new passport last year, and anyone who, I don't know, I guess it's been about 2 years, 3 years, anyone who gets a new passport now, there's a microchip embedded in the passport that has your information in it. And there's if you want to travel as an American citizen, there's nothing that you can do to avoid that. You can't opt out of it. The government has it. I mean, I was thinking today in the airport, the TSA has been trying a new system to monitor the length of security lines by capturing the sort of IP address-like thing that your cell phone admits, and using that to kind of track how long you're waiting in line as you pass through the system. Of course, that's what they say that it's for. It used to just be that you could come out and look at how long the line was and then put more people on. But you could turn your phone off. There are certain things, but to Evan's point, you have to do more and more things that are inconvenient to try and kind of insulate yourself from those kinds of things. And I was having this thought while I was walking past this whole bank of IBM ads, which probably a lot of people have seen, that are sort of, I think, called the Smarter Planet ad campaign that they're running. That says, like, rivers will tell you when they're going to flood, or all these things, this idea that information can be used productively to improve the world. One of the sort of things in the ad campaign, it says, how do we use information? Consumers these days tell us what they want. And the idea of this sort of implicit pronoun of us, as if like we're telling companies what it is that we want, essentially we just have to realize, I think, that is how corporate America sees the information that we volunteer, as a communication that can be used as a resource for them, the same way government or investigators can, to tailor products to us, which I think is kind of fascinating.
Well, it's also funny that people, if you took the sort of most dystopian science fiction scenario and said, what if we all had a chip embedded in us that had a distinct number that said where we were at all times? Right. That's your cell phone.
Right.
Your cell phone, and even people, one of the other speakers at the CIA said this. He said, the cell phone is the ultimate identity tracker, because there's lots of databases that say who you are, your date of birth, and all these things, but the cell phone is the one thing that has a unique identifier that's always with you all the time. So it can verify your location in addition to your identity. Now, you can give someone else your cell phone and throw them off, but most people don't do that. Most people are using their cell phone. So if you really want privacy, you probably shouldn't be carrying around something that's a unique geographic locator to your exact position that can be uncovered by almost anyone, including not just a government investigator. In fact, I'm doing another story now that involves a private investigator. So it's just a PI. He doesn't have any special powers. All he has is his own investigative skills. And he will get people's cell phone information by walking into a Sprint store, for example, and saying, hey, I need these records from this cell phone. And just like with those phone calls, the first clerk will say, well, are you this person? And he'll say, no, I'm not this person. I'm an investigator. I'm a private investigator. And they'll say, oh, well, I can't give you that. And then he'll go to the next store 2 blocks away. And eventually, one of the clerks will say, oh, you're a private investigator? Oh, I must be able to give you this information. We'll print out the bill and hand it to him. It's totally legal.
Right. Amazing. Probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Oh, sorry, there's one right here.
Evan, I have it's like three things. Did you use phones at all? And how was this emotionally for you for a month? Like, just was it frazzling? And then also, was there any contingency plan, like if you got in a car accident or something really bad happened, where you would reveal your identity for like health reasons besides gluten-free products?
So
Phones.
I did. I used prepaid phones. I never used my own cell phone. As a matter of fact, the very first thing I did when I left was I took the battery out of my cell phone, because your cell phone's actually potentially trackable even if it's not on, if the battery's in it. So I took the battery out of my cell phone and it never went back in. So I used prepaid phones, which are also traceable. If someone knows the number, they can trace them. So I used 3 or 4. I would dump them periodically if I thought that the number had, become public. So the second one was emotionally, it was very up and down. It was a very weird experience, obviously, and it was very isolating because I wasn't communicating with people, my friends and my family. So things like being really paranoid, I didn't have anyone around to say, you're acting like an idiot, or no one's really flying a helicopter looking for you. I was in my own, really inside my own internal world, and that that created a lot of sort of freakouts that in your normal life probably wouldn't happen. And then the third thing was for emergencies. Well, a couple things. I tried to carry my real ID with me everywhere I went, like if I went jogging or something, so that I didn't want to like get hit by a car and then end up in a hospital and be sort of like John Doe somewhere in America. And then my family actually, so I wanted to give my family a way to contact me in case they had an emergency or they needed to get in touch with me. And so I mailed them a prepaid phone. And that prepaid phone was programmed with one number, which was the number for one prepaid phone that I had. So these were the only 2 phones that would interact. They were paid for with cash. I put a note in there to my parents saying, if anything happens, use this phone to call my phone. The day that I left, we did have like a family emergency of sorts. My mom called my prepaid phone from her real cell phone. So, even my carefully laid plans were, and I dumped that phone after the first day. So actually, after the first day, they had no way to contact me. But the weird thing was they were actually really worried about my safety, and that ended up being not a concern at all, partly because it was so oddly public, the whole thing, that, it just, there wasn't an issue of sort of like something happening to me, someone coming after me or something like that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Stephen King's, I'm right here.
Oh, there you
Stephen King's 1970s book, The Running Man, had any influence on?
It didn't, because I have not actually read it, but I'm aware that it's deeply relevant, but I haven't read it.
It makes sense because it does kind of bring out a lot of the paranoia stuff, and possibly if you've read it, you may have chose not to do it. I mean, that kind of a book.
Well, I'm not sure then if it's good or bad that I haven't read it, but yeah, it's probably good because it might have deterred me.
Well, it seems like a good place to end. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks a lot.